This episode of Skirmish Supremacy is brought to you by Reformation Brewery, the official beer of your game night.
There it is.
All right.
Our life. So now I can't say any of those things anymore.
You're going to say it anyway. We're going to make you. But anyway.
Good luck with that.
All right, folks. Welcome back to episode 115. If my numbers serve me correctly. I might be wrong, but either way, I'm going to say it's 115 of Skirmish Supremacy. And as usual, we're joined by our co-host, Nick. Nick is over there doing something on camera. I can't quite tell. All I see him doing is sitting there right now. And don't ask any questions about that. Whatever you do, wash your hands. And tonight we are joined by Mike Tunez of Firelock Games. We have had him on the show quite often, and tonight we're going to be talking about something still pirate related, but not 28 millimeter.
That's right.
Right. So we're going to be talking about the new upcoming game, and by upcoming I mean probably about a year and a half out at this point. Is Oak and Iron. So it's Mike. What size scale is this one again?
So it's 1/600 scale, which is, I think that converts to roughly 3 millimeter if you're going to go by wargaming scales. So 3 millimeter, 1/600 scale. Ships are going to be between the smallest ships will be about 3 centimeters, and then the bigger ships will go up to about almost 9. So nice, big, chunky models for the most part. And so if you're familiar with most like naval games, will do 1/1200 scale. So this is literally twice as big as that.
Nice. Okay. And I know Nick and I had a chance to play an early version of that at NashCon this last weekend, and we were both pretty damn impressed with everything we saw right off the bat.
Exactly. Totally impressed with how bad Mike made it. And then he blamed it on Fred having to feed the hippos and not finishing everything.
That's right.
It all works. It all works. Awesome. So yeah, let's talk about how this game is going to differ from Blood and Plunder, because the first thing people are going to ask is, hey, look at that, the pirate company's making more pirate stuff.
What a surprise, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Nobody saw that coming. So the primary way this is going to differ from Blood and Plunder is obviously in the scale. There's no real land component. You'll be able to have, there's going to be a small component where you're going to be able to land your troops to do capture objectives ashore and stuff like that. And that part of it will actually have a tie into Blood and Plunder if you want to kind of like, okay, we've landed our troops, now we fight the battle type of part, right? So it'll be super abstracted in the game. You can just kind of handle it on a dice roll or play a game of Blood and Plunder. So it will have some connectivity to it. But it is it's got a totally different type of game. It's going to use D6s. It's going to use the activation system is inspired by Blood and Plunder's activation system, but it's different. You're going to have a consistent hand of cards that you build yourself. Excuse me. You have a consistent hand of cards that you build yourself to kind of customize, and each different faction has different cards that kind of reflect some of their doctrines in there. And that's part of the and that's going to give you certain abilities as you activate your ships. It's not so much an action management like it is in Blood and Plunder. It's more of a maneuvering and cohesion kind of game.
Okay. Yeah, and to kind of speak on that, when we played, obviously, Nick and I each had, I think it was 6 cards to our activation deck, right. And our decks were different. So there was a couple cards that we had that were the same, but for the most part, I know Nick had a few that allowed him to activate last, but he got more actions. And I had some that just allowed my ships to just go faster.
Right. Yeah, so you probably had like there's one that's called Favorable Wind or something like that.
Yes, Favorable Wind was the one.
Yeah, and then you can kind of go a little faster. There's other ones that you could slow down with and get some extra tight turning if you're moving. And a lot of the cards are dependent on whether or not you're in formation too. So you won't get the bonus if your ships are not in formation, which sailing in formation obviously was a big part of the period. Now, I think an important thing to say off the bat is that this is designed to be sort of a lighter game than Blood and Plunder 2, right? So this is a war game, but it's gonna be packaged, put together, and presented in more of a type of board game fashion, right? So similar to what you see a lot of game companies doing now with games like X-Wing and Tanks and Wings of Glory and stuff like that. So it's gonna have everything you need to play is gonna be in a box, and it's gonna be plastic models. No real assembly required. The masts, we're trying to design it right now, and this is obviously very early, so here's fingers crossed on that. But we're trying to design it so the masts themselves will come off, so you can, one, easier for storage, and two, because it looks really cool when you shoot somebody's mast off to lay it on the side of the ship.
Right. And we know what happens when masks get blown off ships. Apparently, they can still fire a cannon like nobody's business. But
just can't. Yeah, you can still it's just one mast.
Yeah.
No big deal.
I mean,
two more.
Exactly. Why so salty, Tim?
Mostly because our dice went to crap. But we'll touch on that in just a minute. So
that was a weird rolling game for sure.
that was the funniest part in the game. And when we got to the end. We get to the end, Mike finally calls it. And then he goes, all right, so what part did you guys not like? And Tim and I looked at each other and we're like, the part where our dice stopped working.
They stopped working quite quickly.
Well, I corrected that in the rules. So the rules say the dice work. So
okay, perfect. So
there we
go. Now that it says that the dice work, the next time we play it should be vastly different. Got it.
Exactly.
So yeah, let's talk about the dice a little bit. You're doing something that typically I hate, which is custom dice.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Is that? Yeah. So there's custom dice. The dice kind of go along with the flavor and terminology of the period. So I'm not going to make it super so that you've got to be able to understand every single sort of naval term to play the game, but it's just going to have some cool stuff where it kind of harkens back to some of those things, right? So there's 3 ranges where you could fire at ships. There's pistol range, there's musket range, and then anything outside of that is long range. So the dice will have pistols, muskets, and cannons on them. So pistols are for short range, and that's pistol range. Muskets are for medium range, and that's musket range. And then cannons are for long range, right? So cannons. So if you're within those range bands, that's basically what you need to hit. So at pistol range, you could hit with all those, and then at long range, you can only hit with cannons. And then additionally, there's a skull and crossbones face, and that's kind of like the critical face. So that one always counts as a hit on anything you're doing, as well as possibly triggering some critical hits, such as dismasting, as Tim experienced. Oh, Nick experienced. Tim rolled it, but yeah.
Yeah, I experienced it, and that their boat just kind of cruised because it started going really slow. And Tim decided, he's like, oh well, it's mostly dead, and moved his big ship away. Decided not to finish it off. And I got to shoot him a couple of times because he was sailing really slow away from me.
Yeah. I figured at that point, you know what? I'll just let his men die on the boat out in the middle of nowhere. Instead, they decided to get all snarky and fire back. I don't know why, those sons of bitches. But anyway, that game, it ended up going in a bit of a scrum. And then we all lost formation and our dice just sucked. So that's basically the story of how this game went. But so I guess let's talk a little bit more about like some of the mechanics that you're working on for the game. Obviously, everything we're talking about right now is quite early in development, but the core concepts are there. So you mentioned that like building the decks. How is that going to work for the overall play? So it's going to be part of your army building process, right? So when you're building your squadron of ships, first thing you're going to do is you're going to choose a faction card. Sorry, you choose a faction card, and your faction card is going to dictate essentially what all cards you could add to your faction. So there's going to be cards for ships. There's going to be a faction card. There's going to be upgrade cards for the ships, and then there's going to, of course, be the initiative cards. So the initiative cards will all have all the cards in the game that you use to build your fleet will have a faction symbol on them, and all the cards in your army have to basically share a faction symbol. So
There's specific ones, and then there's a generic one. So if you have a generic faction symbol, you can put that anywhere. So the initiative cards, there's going to be a bunch of them that have just generics, right? That anybody can kind of work with. Simple things like, trying to think of a good one. Well, there's one where you can go really fast, but you don't get to take an action, right? So you're going to guarantee to go first. There's other ones that are kind of like an Overwatch, so they could do like a Fire She Bears kind of thing. And those are all things that, that's generic. But you're going to build your fleet to kind of work on your preferences. And Pirates is one of the factions, for example. So you could have you could put a card in your hand to do a to like kind of hide your identity, right? So you can, anytime while you're playing that card, you can't get targeted at long range because you're flying under false colors or something like that.
Right.
And those will be a lot of cards. Some cards are one-time use. Some you can use. They go back to your hand after you use them. So like you could only trick the enemy once, right? You can only fly the false colors once, and they're not going to fall for that again. So that when you play it, it's gone. But it's maybe gives you the opportunity to get in close, which if you're playing as pirates, you want to do, because you typically aren't able to take ships of the line. You're going to take lots of smaller ships. And
right.
That's where you're going to do okay. But typically, you're going to build those cards around your fleet strengths. Then your crews kind of add to that, as well as upgrade cards, which add things like you could add commanders, crew specialists, ship upgrades like extra guns, bigger guns, things of that nature. Maybe a faster sailing ship, and then some special options like some ammo options like grape shot, and chain shot, and stuff like that. Maybe hot shot. So does that answer your question? I feel like I went on a tangent there a little bit.
No. It's totally fine. You are always allowed to go on tangents with this stuff.
And I usually do. So.
Yeah. So cool. So it's all about building the faction deck. Now, I know the one thing that we really didn't do is when we played, Nick and I did have a certain set of cards. Like we each had cards in our hand that basically said, after this is played, it's done. We kind of ignored that for the demo that we played. But are you going to have a limiter to how many of those you put into your activation deck?
Yeah, so right now, the way it works is that there's 5 cards that you have to take.
Okay.
And all 5 of those are they're not one type. You could use them as many times as you want. So everybody gets the same 5, and you could typically add based on the skill of your faction and or your admiral. If you add an admiral to your fleet, which is one of the commander upgrades. You could add 1 to 4 more. 1 to 3 more to your deck. And that's where you can kind of add the customization to it.
Okay, cool. So when it comes time to building the deck is part of your army building process. So, and then as far as picking out the ships, they're each going to have point levels and everything else. Mm-hmm. And, and then you also mentioned upgrade cards. How are the upgrade cards going to play into everything? Is it that you take the upgrades that are just kind of generic, or are they like assigned to specific ships? Like when you pick your ships for the game, you say this upgrade is on this ship, or is there somewhere it's like you could kind of be malleable?
Right. So there are some that are a little malleable. Like there's some that are to give you kind of, we didn't play with, we just kind of set up and fought. What we didn't play with a kind of, there's like a pre-game sort of setup where you can kind of go for deployment, try to get the weather gauge, that kind of thing. So there's some generic cards that, or not all generic, but there's some that give you some advantages there where you can kind of get a bonus to try to have a higher chance of gaining the weather gauge over your opponent when you start the game. But for the most part, it's an upgrade card specifically for the ship. So in those cases, those technically are specifically for the admiral's ship. So each squadron is going to have a flagship, and those would be applied to the flagship, right? But the other ones would be like specific captains for your ship or specialist crew like carpenters, gunners, and people like that. And each ship could have 1 commander, as of now, 1 commander, and then 2 of each of the other upgrade types. So, for example, you could have, let's say, a named character like Henry Morgan as your commander on that ship, and then he'd probably end up being the admiral based on the fleet you're going with. You'd have Henry Morgan, and then you could do a master gunner, let's say, or a pilot to help you not run aground like you do if you're Henry Morgan.
Maybe don't drink rum on your own boat. You just,
yeah. So, well, what kind of pirate
sober crew? Like that's a Henry Morgan card. Sober crew.
There you go. But yeah, stuff very much in that vein. And then you'd have, your ship. Maybe you want to make you have a nice, clean, freshly cleaned hull, so you can go a little faster. So you have an upgrade card for that. Another one, let's say, take heavy guns. Take heavy guns at closer range. You could re-roll critical hits, right?
Wow. Okay.
Stuff like that. So, and then you could do a fire ship, right? And these upgrade cards, by the way, which is important because I mentioned the fire ship. As of now, they're all secret. So you'll see that a ship has a certain number of upgrade cards, but they'll be face down. And once something happens that triggers those cards, they'll get revealed, such as a fire ship. So you may not realize that your opponent is doing literally a Henry Morgan, and has turned the largest ship in his fleet into a fire ship and is coming right for your flagship. So, and once he gets within musket range, you'll realize it's a fire ship, and at that point, you gotta try to handle it. So,
handle it, scream around like a little girl, and run for the rowboats.
Just sink that thing as quickly as possible. That's amazing. Yeah, we talked about those a little bit at the convention. Obviously, we didn't get a chance to play with any of them because I know that there's still a lot of work to be done. But I kind of wanted to touch back on like the pirate captains and things of that nature as the upgrades. Now, in Blood and Plunder, the standard miniatures game, like obviously Henry Morgan's a character, so are other people that served underneath him, like William Kidd, John Morris, and a couple of others. Is there going to be a way in Oak and Iron to say, yes, Henry Morgan's my commander, this ship has John Morris, this ship has William Kidd?
Yeah, because each ship has a commander slot.
Okay, perfect.
And then one of those commanders will end up being your admiral.
Okay.
How that works. And you don't have to have that slot filled. You can leave it empty, but then you just have kind of like a nameless, faceless commander with nothing special about it.
Right.
And that's how that works.
Okay, cool. Yeah, because that was one thing that I wasn't quite certain on when we were talking about it, but
right. Yeah, so you could do, if you wanted to do like Morgan and all the guys who sailed under him, John Morris and Robert Serrels and all the other guys, there's like 100 of them. Yeah. I feel like so,
lots.
Yeah. So you could do like a little mini fleet, like the fleet that's going to attack Panama, and you could do maybe a what if the Spanish caught them at sea and battled them, you could do that kind of thing. So each ship could have a named commander if you wanted it to. So obviously, I'd eat up a lot of points, but yeah, you could do it.
Right. Okay. Cool. Yeah, because I was kind of wondering on that. Especially like if you decide to take the game and make it bigger, like every player is going to want that option. Like when we were talking at NashCon, you were saying that the average game size is going to be anywhere between 3 to 5 ships, depending upon what you take.
Right.
And obviously, you're going to have a way for people to play bigger versions of the game. So I could see that happening at some point.
Yeah. So that's going to probably be in there right from launch, provided we have the time to develop it. If not, it'll come in at some point. But the general idea is going to be like Army Skill in Blood and Plunder. Is when you play a typical game of Oak and Iron, it's squadron on squadron engagement, right? So we each have 3 to 5 ships, possibly. You could still play more than that, but average would be about 3 to 5. And they're acting as a single squadron, right? So it's more like a naval. It's kind of like a naval skirmish. And then you can play the fleet scale. So when you play fleet scale, you have to break all of your ships up into 3 different squadrons, right? And each one is kind of like its own army. Each one of those squadrons will have on average 3 to 5 ships. Right, and those are still pretty small squadrons, fleets. Of like 15 ships aside, roughly. And but that's kind of what the game does. We're not aiming to be able to do, 300 ships on the table, like Trafalgar or the Anglo-Dutch Wars or something.
Right.
But I mean, yeah, we covered those conflicts, or the Anglo-Dutch War anyway. Napoleonic Wars eventually, maybe. Let's see how this one does.
Yeah.
But you could. I mean, if you wanted to do a big con game, you could probably put it onto like a 20-foot table. But since we went with the 1/600 scale, we're focused more on those kind of smaller fleets, bigger squadrons kind of thing.
Right.
And I think
It makes
it's a fun scale to game naval at. So
yeah, because I know that like your typical 2-player game, like 1-on-1, right now the table is a 3x3, and I'm guessing for multiplayer it's going to go 4x4, 6x4, up from there depending upon what you want to do.
Right. Yeah.
Cool.
We played 3x3, but the recommended is probably going to be closer to 3x4. 3x3 works for about what we played is about the cap it'll fit in. So you could do a 3x3 and that works if you're limited on space. And you could still have a few ships to the line. And that's when you're playing more like 3 ships aside. But if you're going up to 4 or 5, you're probably going to want to play on a 3x4. Or 4x4, it makes a difference, just increase the deployment. But and then for fleets, you're going to want to do a 6x4.
Okay. Got it. So
or 6x3, which is the popular size now, which will work fine.
Nice. Okay, cool. So overall, a little bit different table sizes than what a lot of people are used to between like the 3x3, 3x4, and things of that nature.
Right. Which is why 4x4 is fine. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It'll just make it to where you probably have to deploy a little bit closer.
Right.
Awesome. And then, so as far as the, kind of going back to the dice mechanics, we kind of covered range, but there were some other symbols on the dice as well. Like the skull and crossbones is not only a hit, but then you can roll it again for a potential critical. And at this time, you had a D20 set up with like a small chart for what would happen on a critical. Is that something that might change over time, or is that something that you guys are pretty happy with right now?
I did the D20 thing just because I got tired of constantly printing and cutting out a whole new deck of damage cards. So I just turned it into a chart with D20 is very close statistically to what the card chances would be. And if you remember, the chart had bubbles on it.
Yeah. So
every time you roll the crit, you mark the bubble off, and that card is spent basically. So once you run out of those bubbles, you can't get that one again. So it kind of leads you to a kind of a more simulation of the deck, but it will be a little damage deck, and it's got effects like explosions, dismastings, obviously extra damage and extra fatigue and fires and waterline hits and sail damage and all the typical things you'd expect. And there's some fun ones, like when your helm gets shot out, if it happened to one of you, your helmsman gets killed and your ship just has to turn upwind.
Yep, that happened. Knocked me out of formation.
Yep.
And then Tim couldn't capitalize on it.
No, I could not do a damn thing.
You tried, but the dice just said, nope, you're just going to roll nothing but sails.
I swear, that was probably actually the last good shot.
Yeah, it was.
The rest of the game was just crappy dice.
It was all downhill from there.
Point blank range. There is a 5 in 6 chance of hurting the other person. Go ahead and roll. None hit.
All sails. It's like my crew's like, no, we got to fix the sails. Shoot the boat. Shoot the boat. So
yeah, no, that was a very unusual game. I can assure you that I've played many other ones, and we have not had such unusual dice results. So
apparently, my fleet was full of nothing but just naval trainees. So just reading flag signals wrong, the whole 9 yards. It was bad. But it
must have been your logwood cutters, and they must have been drinking.
They must have been drinking. But overall, I liked the way that the game was going as far as like, everything made sense. Again, one of the things we talked about quite a bit at the con is that you wanted to get back to like the Age of Sail style games without it being like some giant, chunky, chart heavy thing that takes forever. Like we've all played those games. If we've been around for a while, we've played historical games. We've all played those games where it's like, oh, okay, I need to roll the hit and then roll on this chart. Did I do any damage? Roll on this chart. Okay, I did damage. What did I do? Roll on this chart. And it takes 5 minutes to figure out what it was that the one cannon did that fired.
Right, and those games are cool. They have they definitely do a lot of simulation.
Right,
like you have every single point of sail has a different effect, and I've seen games that literally use the 32 compass points for a different point of sail, and honestly, I think that's kind of cool. But at the same time, it's not exactly practical to just sit down and pick up and play that kind of game for a quick evening of gaming, of light, fun gaming. So what we're going for more in Oak and Iron is we're really trying to capitalize on the important tactics. So the game should still yield a historical result, right? So, and then we've got the initiative cards, which kind of represents signals and different things, and that's very abstract. But what it represents is the importance of cohesion between fleets.
Right.
So
yeah, and that's definitely one of the things that I liked, because there were times where it's like I had cards that really wanted me to stay in cohesion, but there was times where it was really difficult to do that, because it's like, okay, if I stay in cohesion, there's a good chance that Nick is just going to be able to broadside the crap out of everything I have. So, it was one of those things. It's like I had to really weigh out, like, okay, how important is this ability right now compared to, can I break off, do some fancy maneuvering, have my dice fail on me, and hopefully come back together to do something with it.
Right. and then when you break formation is important, right? Because if you guys almost saw, because you had a beautiful setup, but then the dice just worked out.
Yeah.
But
and the worst part is I had the cards in my hand. I'm like, stay in formation. I can't do anything.
So
because my dice hate me.
So the game has it's got alternating actions between ships, right? So you're gonna move a ship, I move a ship. We can keep going back and forth till we're done, and then you go into the fire phase, and then you do the same thing. However, all ships you have in formation can all fire at the same time. So if you break formation, your opponent doesn't. He can just nail you with all of his ships and focus down on maybe your closest ship, the one that's going to be the most threat, and really disable that ship temporarily, because one of the things we carry over from Blood and Plunder is the fatigue system, but it works completely different in this game. Yeah. So it kind of has it's the exact same philosophy behind the design of it, whereas it represents your crew being killed and or suppressed or panicking or just tired or whatever. And so, but because technically a ship represents like what would be many, many units in Blood and Plunder, it all boils down to losing dice. So for each point of fatigue you have, you lose one dice on any kind of action you have to roll for, right? So whether that be sailing maneuvers or firing cannons or repairs, you're losing dice on those things. So it kind of represents some gun crews being suppressed, or just outright knocked out. And then, so going first and being able to fire all your ships could be a tremendous advantage if somebody's trying to just come in and board on you. So,
right. That was one of the things that we didn't quite get a chance to do as much. And a lot of that was just like my timing on boarding Nick's ships was set up wrong. So I that's my own fault for just not, getting into it that way. But then even actually after we boarded, neither one of us could roll anything to really do anything. I think we just we grappled successfully.
You were like doing one fatigue on each other at a time.
Yeah, one fatigue on each other each time. So it's like everybody's jumping on board and just instead of fighting, they're arm wrestling. Yeah. And it was just...
That's how we ended up... One of your ships got captured. One of you lost your flagship, and that's how we ended up calling it, right?
No, it was just that I had that one ship that had the mast blown off of it.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
And you're Tim wins because your ship lost its mast.
We turned out, yeah.
Yeah,
because the game will play to 8 turns. So after 8 turns, you kind of just look at the situation, and there's a point scoring system for winning and losing and all that. So
right. I had him on the ropes, coach. I had him on the rope. You just stopped me too soon.
Yeah, but Nick's ship was crippled, which was a crippled ship does score victory points for you. So, which a ship basically which takes 7 damage becomes crippled, and a crippled ship has a chance of being destroyed every time you hit it. And I think your ship was crippled from like the second turn because you just got
and I couldn't do anything.
Couldn't finish the
job. That's Tim for you. Can't finish.
That's a completely unrelated topic, but anyway, it's every time I shot his ship again, it's like my whole crew was like they felt sorry for his crew. They're like, no, we're not going to do that. It's just garbage. And then of course he's taking this crippled ship, rallying and then firing back at me with everything he's got. That
was the best part was that, at first I couldn't shoot or anything because I had too much fatigue. And then I just managed to slowly bring it down. Especially
over like 4 turns.
especially using the, I get 2 actions this turn. Well, I can't fix anything other than my morale, so might as well reduce the fatigue.
Right.
Rally twice. Boom. All right. Fire.
Yeah. And here I can't hit anything to save my life. Like, apparently, right off the bat, I can cripple a ship, but then I just got to let it go. I should have just gone on to cripple everything else instead of trying to even focus on that one anymore. Just let it sail off into the sunset. But no, nothing. So awesome, man. So, I mean, we are still talking a ways out on this because I know that you've talked in the past. Obviously, there's still the fulfillment of No Peace Beyond the Line. Right. There's the next iteration of Blood and Plunder, which is taking it now into the 18th century with a lot of the pirates that most people kind of know about. And I know that's kind of on the plan next. Again, everything loosely based at this point. So we're talking on this probably a 2019 Kickstarter launch, if anything.
You're going to see the Kickstarter sometime this fall, late summer, maybe. It just depends on what assets we can get together. It's just a matter of kind of finalizing exactly the process we're going to use and getting some prototypes done. And once we get all the little components kind of nailed down, which we've been actively working on, then we're going to go ahead and just launch it as soon as possible because we're dying to get the game to people because really it's been in development since March, late March, like right about a week or 2 before Adepticon. I started working on it, and I mean, I think it's come pretty far, considering it. It's just kind of like everything culminated nicely, and the rule set's pretty simple. It's right now sitting at around 11 pages, with some graphics and stuff. So that's probably about actually 7 to 8 pages of actual text, which is pretty straightforward. And a lot of the complexity and then all the other stuff is kind of just handled by the initiative cards and the damage cards. So there's not a bunch of there's no tables you have to roll or anything like that, or so it's gonna be you're definitely gonna see it at Gen Con this year. We're gonna be demoing it there. I know for sure I'll have a demo set ready by then, fully painted and all that. So you can kind of get to see if you're gonna be at Gen Con. We're going to be at the War Store booth, so just come on by and see us there and give the game a shot. But yeah, definitely delivery 2019. But a Kickstarter probably in a few months, since we've just kind of sitting here waiting on our books to get here from China. Everything else is ready to go, so we're making the most of it and just try to just get all this done as fast as possible.
Yeah, I guess it's one thing we haven't really had a chance to talk about up to this point, because I know people have been asking a lot in the Blood and Plunder groups and things like that. And everybody keeps asking, when are we going to get our Kickstarter? When are we going to get our Kickstarter? Well, folks, in case you haven't been filled in, China is being a bunch of a-holes and holding on to the books for some reason and just giving Firelock the runaround as to what's going on with the books.
Yeah, well, the books are on the boat. So
we know that now. The books are on the boat as of NashCon.
Yeah, at least.
Okay.
So, so we're still,
you were this last weekend.
Yeah, we're gonna make a big announcement soon about everything, and we're gonna announce when we're gonna open pre-orders. We might throw in with the announcement, if I have enough free material done for it, our organized play program, as well as our volunteer program, which we don't have a name for yet, but basically a program to kind of help promote the game in stores and run events and things like that.
The Blunder Monkeys?
I don't understand what that is. So anyway,
you heard it here, folks. The organized play / demo team is the Blunder Monkeys.
This is why I can't talk about things here. This is.
I mean, I'm just waiting for the Blunder Monkey slot in Oak and Iron because there has to be one.
Skirmish Supremacy is why Firelock Games can't have nice things.
That's right. That's exactly why.
But I think the best part is Alex commented on one of the Blunder Monkey posts and went, "This is never going to go away, is it?" Very sadly. So when even Alex is regretting his joke,
No, it's not. It's not ever going to go away, unfortunately.
it's not.
I know. I'm just going to keep denying it though. So it's fine.
Well, it may or may not pop up as some sort of April Fool's card in the future.
You just got to find another one that's more distracting so you forget about the thing.
See, you tried Skeleton Pirates. That didn't work out too well for you.
They just got Blunder Monkeys too.
Yeah. That's okay. We'll think of something.
You won't take away Blunder Monkey. You might as well not try.
I mean, I can do that, but I mean, I've already done it technically.
Yeah, the card's been removed.
No, the card hasn't been removed. It lives on the Blender Monkey Facebook page.
Yeah, but it's been removed from anything that's officially Firelock.
It still says Firelock on it.
And now, folks, you can get it put on a mug.
Yeah. Tom Pace, who's working on our very excellent new army builder, which is going to come out really soon, by the way.
That's amazing. That's actually something else I wanted to ask you, because I know that with all the new stuff coming out for No Peace Beyond the Line, and like you had a lot of expansion stuff that kind of popped up when you guys were doing the Blood and Plunder Easy Army, that hasn't been updated in a while. So that was one of the things I wanted to ask, is if you had an official army builder that you guys were working on.
Yeah, and Greg Sitter of Easy Army is super awesome, and he does all that for free, and he runs a whole bunch of different Easy Army sites. He does. If you play a miniatures game, you probably use his site a lot. But there's a lot of stuff. There's a lot more stuff we want to do with the builder that I would just feel guilty asking him to do out of the kindness of his heart. So So we're working with Tom Pace, who you guys, if you're on the Facebook group, I'm sure you see him post occasionally. And he owns a custom mug of that we won't speak about, and which is why I brought him up earlier. But he's a
firearm wielding simian.
He just kind of came out of the blue one day and showed me this thing. I was like, this is awesome. So, and it's going to have some connectivity to our website, so you can kind of like build an army and just add the units you want that you're missing. It's going to eventually have a collection manager and stuff like that. So it's going to be really cool. And the version he's got, the first version is going to come out, and it's just going to be the builder, and then we're going to add to that from there. But he's almost done with it. Last I talked to him, I mean, so far it prints. You can build armies. Everything looks okay so far. All the stuff from the Peace Beyond the Line is there. All the options. So it's going to be. I think people are going to be really impressed with what he's come up with. He's done a great job.
Cool. And for those of you not familiar, one of the things that happened with No Peace Beyond the Line is that it is much more than just saying, like, you're going to take marineros for the Spaniards. You can actually take marineros with muskets. So they have different upgrades that you could do to the units that give them a little bit different ways to play, other than just make them veteran or inexperienced.
Right. Yeah.
Or in the case of natives, just give them all pistols, because they all like to John Woo their way across the map.
Exactly. Yep.
So,
and they'll do that. And yeah, and hopefully that builder will be expanded to Oak and Iron when we come out with that. And for those, and then on the new things front too, we finally started working on Scurvy dice. So if you ever were at Gen Con, that first year we were there, 2 years ago now, we had a little dice game, pirate themed kind of thing, that's made by a guy named Chris Strecker, and we've been trying to find the time to put it out. And again, with this lull we're having while we're just waiting for our books to show up because everything else is done, we went ahead and took advantage of now that game is getting printed. So hopefully very soon. We're printing all the boxes and components, so it could still be a while. I don't know how soon, but I think I'm going to hear back in a week or two on that. But that's another game coming down the pike. So by 2019, Firelock's going to have at least 3 games in print. So we're expanding our library. We're doing more things, and we're trying to, and we're going to just be a bigger, better company, giving you lots of cool new games. That's the plan, anyway.
Awesome. So again, you're hearing it here, where again, Firelock is not, well, they're still just the pirate company, but they're going to have a lot more options for piracy for you.
And we will definitely expand beyond pirates at some point, but being Firelock Games and all, we got to make sure we cover all the pirate bases first, then we can move on from there.
Right, exactly.
They're even expanding into collectibles, like Blunder Monkey plushes.
I don't know. No, I don't think we are. Last I checked.
They're even coming out with a children's book called Blunder Monkey and Me, followed by Blunder Monkey's Big Day.
If you write it, we'll publish it. How about that?
Oh man,
you heard it here, folks.
You got to illustrate it too.
Done.
Mike, I don't think you realize you just done fucked up. So
you thought Alex unleashed something.
Yeah. So now we're gonna contact Tom, Neil, especially Neil. Actually, I'm gonna Facebook him right now. But anyway. So,
I mean, yeah, it's already bad enough that your new army builder is going to have a Blunder Monkey hidden somewhere in there.
I don't think so. I will.
Mike's gonna proofread the whole thing and be like, "No."
I'll pull the plug on the whole thing if I find a monkey in there. So
I will host it somewhere else myself.
That's amazing. So you also mentioned kind of getting back into the Oak and Iron thing too, where you said that it's going to tie into Blood and Plunder. Is there a certain way? I know, obviously this is still really early, but is there a certain way that you plan on breaking down the difference between what's going on the naval front and the I guess the skirmish game front? Like, is there a way to where it's like, okay, obviously about mid game, you're going to land on a beach and try to do whatever you're going to try to do. Is that going to be something to where it's like, okay, we pause Oak and Iron, go over to Blood and Plunder, play that out. Those results go back into our Oak and Iron game.
Possibly. I haven't. Okay. What I know I'll definitely do, because I know this part will work, and I'm going to go beyond that. And I'm going to see how it works beyond that, because I don't want it to be something that bogs down like crazy.
Right.
But what it could likely be is kind of like Oak and Iron is sort of like the preparatory game into Blood and Plunder, or vice versa. If you're escaping from a Blood and Plunder game maybe and getting to your ship, then you've got to get out past the blockade in Oak and Iron, whatever you could do, which is, that kind of thing is kind of easily done in Blood and Plunder already. So I don't think that'll be the most appealing part of it. But it's more along the lines of you can do it. I think you're going to be able to do it where you can kind of stop the game and stop an Oak and Iron game, resolve a small Blood and Plunder game ashore, right? So say there's an objective that's got to be captured ashore. So you play your small Blood and Plunder skirmish, and then you kind of jump back into Oak and Iron, and maybe you got to break out, right? But that would probably be the extent of how it works. It's more like the way I'm thinking about it that I know will work is more like it's kind of like, all right, you've made it. If you pass the scenario, let's say you got to deploy troops or recover troops or whatever, then you kind of just transfer. So the Oak and Iron game ends and goes over to Blood and Plunder, or vice versa.
Okay, so it's not going to be like play half of a game of Oak and Iron, switch to Blood and Plunder, finish that, go back for the second half of Oak and Iron. Yeah, it's going to be complete.
Yeah, that's a part of the game I haven't really started working on yet, but I have thought about. Okay. And so it's just going to be a matter of playing around with it and seeing what works and what doesn't feel. Because I've played games where you do stuff like that, and often it's kind of like, maybe two people will do that because it's not convenient, especially if you have limited table space, and then you've got to clear off one game and start another game.
Yeah, well, we used to kind of do that back, when this is growing up, still like in high school, which is a long, long time ago at this point. But we used to do, Battlefleet Gothic. We'd do this. We'd have one table that's the space battle, and then we'd have the other table that's our 40K land battle. And it took us full 6x4 tables to really resolve whatever was going on, between those, and like to do that. And I'm just kind of thinking back to those. It's like for us to do that was an all weekend thing, now keep in mind that was between 6 people playing. So if it's different for 2, but even for 2 people, I see that as like,
and those aren't fast games either. So
those are not fast games. So
those are not like playing an hour kind of games. So, I think definitely a way that it could work too is to have kind of both games going on simultaneously, like you say. So
Right.
so you can actually reinforce what's happening ashore with your ship, maybe even bombard from the sea, and come up with rules for that. And that's, I think, a good way where it'll fit in nicely, where you have two separate groups of players, but they're interacting in their games. So that I could definitely see that working, especially if you're playing army scale Blood and Plunder. And if you're already doing a big game as it is, and you maybe want to speed it up, instead of having the ships in Blood and Plunder, you could have them acting in Oak and Iron, and I could see that working for really massive Blood and Plunder games, just to kind of speed them up and say, not everybody has enough space to run 6 galleons on the table, so that might be a good way to do something like that.
If they don't, they're wrong. But anyway, the point of it is that they should definitely have, like, I kind of like that option, because the other thing of it is too, is that, I look at it from the standpoint that even if it's, sloops offshore, right? Like the fact that, not everybody who gets in a Blood and Plunder right away has ships. So at least this way they get the effect of having a ship in their Blood and Plunder game, where it's like the sloop is just, it's technically off the board on their deployment edge, but they're able to just light cannon the crap out of anything, up to about 18 to 24 inches in the board.
Right.
So, if they're kind of doing the typical, I guess like objective snag and run back to the boat scenario, they grab it and then they can use their sloop offshore to pepper their, pursuance to get back to the boat. So I could see that working out quite well. And vice versa, where it's like, well, if they die to a man, well, you switch back to Oak and Iron. That ship's not doing hot when it comes time to getting out of there.
Right. Exactly. So, yeah, there's cool options for it for sure. And it's something we definitely want to do. There's no reason not to, right? So There'll definitely be some level of tie-in with Blood and Plunder. Yeah. Because it will be, the Blood and Plunder universe is where this kind of fits in.
Right. So. Yeah, and as long as you don't take it too over the top ridiculous, there's certain things that, well, we're all going to make it over the top and ridiculous. Like I'm fairly certain that somebody is going to make a fleet for Francois L'Olonnais, and they're going to put him in a brigantine, and they're going to put skulls all over it to make it look like he worships corn. It's going to happen.
Yeah.
It's just, someone's going to do something crazy.
You can't avoid that, no. That's part of the fun of wargaming.
Exactly.
All your crazy things.
Yeah, so I guess, in that reenactment, it could be that Francois L'Olonnais loses his brigantine, paddles ashore, and then just gets eaten by natives.
That sounds like what really happened.
Yeah, exactly. So. They threw him in a fire pit, ripped him limb from limb.
Yep.
So.
Yep.
Fun times. That's what happens when you spend a whole 6 years as a pirate. So... Yeah, it's I'm actually looking forward to this game. I know that right now you guys are covering a lot of the same stuff that, the similar stuff that's in Blood and Plunder, but Oak and Iron, you guys are looking at actually making it to a full-on ship of the line game.
Right.
Where even if you were to convert it to 28 millimeter, these ships would dwarf, not completely dwarf, but it would make that galleon look tiny.
Yep. Our galleon is one of the ships that'll be in the game initially, would be one. It's going to be on the smaller end of ships for the game,
right? So
that should kind of give you an indication of the kind of size ships we're talking about here. Where 6 ships of the line are going to be the main stars of this. So you're talking about between 6 and third rates, probably the most common, with first and second rates making an appearance as well, but probably not as commonly unless you're playing a bigger game. And then it'll also scale as well too. So the way the rules are written right now, there's 3 kind of main battle sizes, and there's like coastal raid. I think there was a small battle and then a blockade, I believe is what I called them. And each one has a different points level, plays on a different table size, or recommended table size, and focuses on different types of ships. So you could play your coastal raid, right? And that's more of like a typical. That'd be something you'd play in Blood and Plunder as a grand scale, right? So maybe you've got like 4 or 5 sloops and brigantines and frigates on each side of the table, where that'd be like a small game in Oak and Iron, right? So it could be like a bunch of small pirate ships fighting against maybe 1 or 2 ships of the line, 5th and 6th rates maybe, or maybe like a 4th rate backed up by like a sloop,
right?
Something like that. So
the sloop is just there to scout.
Yeah. Exactly. So, I mean, and that kind of thing, that kind of small engagement. And then we played the middle one when we were there at NashCon. And then the larger one is going to be more, where you might see a ship, a first or second rate ship of the line, but still single squadron. And then after that, we come in fleet engagement, and that's when you open up to multiple squadrons.
Right. So, as far as a first-rate ship, that's what's considered a man of war, if I remember correctly.
Oh, any ship that's designed for fighting is a man of war, technically.
Okay.
But the first-rate ship of the line is basically a man of war. If you're talking about a ship, a battleship, a ship of the line, so anything from a 6th-rate up to a 1st-rate. So
okay.
our galleon would be like a 6th-rate man of war. So at the very bottom of the scale.
Right. So, folks, for those of you that know Blood and Plunder, let that sink in, especially after seeing the monster. That's the galleon. So even when you get your Kickstarter, take a look at that galleon all painted and assembled and go, this thing is an absolute midget compared to whatever else is going to be in Oak and Iron.
That's right. And I'm not sure. So we're trying to figure out right now exactly how many ships we can get in the initial set. Mm-hmm. Also, how many different models for each type of ship, because there's definitely going to be different stat cards for different ships of the line for different nationalities. So if we can get the pricing to a good place where we can keep. Obviously, it's important for us to make this game as affordable as it can be, because that's how we like to do our things. But it'd be really cool to be able to do a separate sculpt for each nationality's different rated ships, right? So this is a Spanish 3rd rate, this is an English 4th rate, et cetera, et cetera. But at the very least, when we get started, we'll just, even if we are stuck with just one of those, there'll still be cards for the different nationalities' ships.
Right.
So each one will play differently if you're playing it in a different faction.
Yeah, and I know that you mentioned at NashCon that, again, it's still up in the air. And so, folks, when I say this, keep that in mind. But you're still kind of kicking around the idea of potentially having at least to a base amount pre-painted, where it might be, even if it's just like khaki sails and brown ships.
Right. Well, we're looking into it. We have not gotten any quotes or anything on that yet, but and I don't want to do any kind of.
That's a fingers crossed, really, really big hope.
But what we are definitely going to do is do different colored plastics for the different components. So you'll have something that's kind of playable right on the table. So you'll have a brown hole, the hole made of brown plastic, and the sails made of white plastic, for example. Things like that. So that's going to be the bare minimum of what we're going to do, because I've already been assured that that's not going to be a problem. So at the very least, you can kind of play out of the box, and it's not just gray ships sitting on a table.
Right.
So it'll have some kind of semblance of how it's supposed to look.
Okay, cool. So that definitely helps things along, because even at that point, if people don't want to take the time to paint the ships, they at least have something that looks like a ship and not just like a little gray blob on the table.
Exactly.
Which is cool.
Yeah. And I actually did an experiment with that, where I just got a ship model of a similar scale, just painted it brown, and then painted the sails white, and then I put a wash on it, and it actually looked pretty decent. They're pretty small compared to like a 28 millimeter ship, obviously. So It doesn't really need a ton of paint to really come to life. So just a little wash with those two base colors, and it's very definitely playable. It's definitely technically your 3-color minimums there, right? So.
Yeah, exactly. Brown, white, wash, done. All right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's great. And then, of course, you have custom bases that will be available for it, because I know that was one of the things that we really played with.
The ships will come with their bases. This will be very much packaged in a way similar to a lot of the more streamlined games like that lately, right? Like Blood Red Skies and X-Wing and games like that, where your pack will come with the ship. It'll come with the cards for it, possibly the little punch-out tokens, depending on whether or not we have enough of them in the box or not, or how that goes. So, we definitely will have enough to play. Obviously, let me clarify what I mean is if we have an excessive amount in the box, you'll never need another one.
Right.
It just depends on the size of the trays and all that. But anyway, I don't want to get into too many of those boring details.
Yeah.
But
nobody cares about that. All they care about is when do we get our ships on the table.
Exactly.
Well, they also care about, and I've got to ask, because they'll get mad at us, or there'll be a million questions of it. But are you going to do anywhere other than the Caribbean, the Barbary Coast?
Yeah, initially our sets are the first set will focus on the Caribbean, but it does expand our timeline. So it already goes into the 18th century timeline that Blood and Plunder is going to move into. So the time frame for the game is roughly 1660 to 1750, right? So that covers, or 1760, sorry. So that covers the buccaneering period. That covers the Anglo-Dutch Wars, or some of them. The War of Spanish Succession, War of Jenkins' Ear, a lot of King William's War, or the 9 Years' War. A bunch of conflicts that are happening at the time. So it's there's so many options. Everybody's literally fighting everybody else at some point. So that makes it really cool. And so, like I said, we're going to focus on the Caribbean, North America, that kind of thing first. So you will see Blackbeard, for example, as a commander, Black Bart Roberts, Jack Rackham, and Charles Vane. All those famous pirates will be part of the opening salvo of the game. And then from there, the first plan is to kind of shift it to Europe, right? So we're going to do like Jean Bart and some of the other famous European privateers, like the Dunkirkers and all that fun stuff, as well as the naval battles, obviously, that happened over there. Then from there, I don't know. But we're definitely going to shift east and south from that point. So definitely going to cover Africa and India and farther east, perhaps. So there's a lot of places we can go with this. And it's a lot more, it's easier to design for. The research is significantly less than Blood and Plunder because we just have to research the ships and the tactics instead of every little modicum of uniform detail and all the other crazy things you have to do for Blood and Plunder, which make it much more time consuming. So this game will expand in setting a little faster than Blood and Plunder. But it'll be cool because it could kind of give you a preview of what'll be coming in Blood and Plunder, because anything we do there, we're probably going to cover eventually in Blood and Plunder. So
nice. I dig it. Nick, is there any other questions you want to get in there? I know we kind of talked about our sucky game that we went through and completely broke his algorithm.
No, not really. I think we hit it all.
Well, I'm just glad that despite the fact that you guys rolled so bad, I could definitely tell you still enjoyed it. So that's a good sign.
Yes.
Because if you're just rolling like piss the whole time and you're still having fun, that's probably, I think the game is in a good place.
Those acting classes have paid off.
Yeah, we were enjoying ourselves right up to the point where we had to pick up dice and roll them, only because we knew at that point what was inevitable. We're like, oh, look at that, 18 dice, and I only got one fatigue. Great, yeah, awesome. Anyway, so yeah, folks, Mike, where can they find out more about Firelock Games?
You totally broke up there. Try that one more time.
Oh. Sorry about that. Where can people find out more about Firelock Games? Obviously, Oak and Iron is still out there a little bit, but Blood and Plunder, where can they find everything? Best place, of course, is firelockgames.com. You can always check out our Facebook page, Blood and Plunder. Well, we have our official Facebook page, and then Blood and Plunder, Buccaneer Across the Spanish Main is an awesome fan site that's got almost 4,000 members now, last I looked. And people do some incredible stuff on there. Definitely check that out. Our Kickstarter pages, obviously, and keep your eyes peeled to the main website. The new piece, the No Peace Beyond the Line stuff. We're going to start again. We'll make an announcement soon, and all that stuff's going to start showing up for pre-order. So we can start making it so that right when we ship the Kickstarter, the pre-orders are going to come right on its heels, just like we did for the previous Kickstarter. And I think I'm really excited to see what happens with all that No Peace Beyond the Line stuff finally lands and people get to play with it. And just, it really opens up the game. It's like Alex always calls it, my partner Alex Aguilar. He says it's a 17th century American sandbox, right? Covers the whole America, not just North America. But I mean, we kind of over-delivered on this thing. Which is probably why, the printers. I mean, the 17th century book, the one that covers, the one that's got the leatherette, man, that thing is beautiful. I mean, that thing is amazing. I actually forgot. I had a copy and I completely forgot to take it to NashCon to show you guys. But you son of a yeah.
But we'll have one soon. they're on their way. So hopefully they get here sometime very, very soon, and we can start shipping them. And I mean, people are just going to be blown away, I think, by the quality. And if you've seen the PDF already, you see the sheer amount of stuff that has been added. And it's not just filler. Like we really went out of our way to research everything and make sure to try to capture the flavor of a lot of stuff. And there's just like, that was probably 2-3 years worth of releases if we were more sane. But we worked ourselves to the bone and made it happen. And I think I'm just excited for people to get it. That wasn't even part of the original question, but
it doesn't matter. It all works together. Yeah. Awesome, folks. Well, that's going to wrap up this episode of Skirmish Supremacy. We will see you next time. Right. Thanks for listening to another episode of Skirmish Supremacy. To see more of the antics that Nick and I do, you can check us out on Facebook at Skirmish Supremacy. We also have Twitter, which we can be reached at Skirmish Supreme, because apparently Skirmish Supremacy does not fit in Twitter. And if you want to email us directly, you can reach us at tim@skirmishsupremacy.com or nick@skirmishsupremacy.com. Thanks for listening.